On May 19, Ms. Guo, 47-year-old, and her husband boarded a flight from Guangdong to Vancouver, Canada, to reunite with their son after years of separation. It must have been a happy and beautiful scene, as the family of three reunited in Vancouver. However, 2 weeks later, as the couple prepared to board their flight back to China, Ms. Guo mysteriously vanished. Hundreds of residents near the hotel where Ms. Guo stayed were questioned, but no one had seen the woman. In the days that followed, Ms. Guo's husband and son wandered the streets of Canada, holding missing person flyers. Tearful and exhausted, their expressions moved everyone who saw them. But there was one thing no one expected. Among the two men, one knew exactly where Ms. Guo was and was deliberately hiding a very dark secret. Before diving into today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay updated with the latest videos. On the morning of June 8, Canadian police received a report. The caller was a Chinese student named Tang Yuangzi, who stated that his mother had suddenly disappeared and the family suspected she had been kidnapped. Since the victim was a Chinese citizen, the police took the case seriously and immediately arrived at the scene. Based on the young man's statement, they learned the details of the incident. The missing person, Guo Lianji, 47-year-old, had come to Canada 2 weeks prior to visit her son, Tang Yuangxi, and was scheduled to return to China that day. The son had driven to the hotel early in the morning to pick up his mother and take her to the airport. However, after packing her belongings, he returned to find that his mother had vanished. Ms. Guo's phone was unreachable, so Yuangxi decided to call the police immediately, hoping his mother was not in danger. For 7 days following the report, police launched a large-scale search and interviewed numerous residents, but no one had seen Ms. Guo, as though the woman had vanished into thin air. Because no ransom calls were received during these 7 days, police theorized that Ms. Guo had not been kidnapped. After all, Ms. Guo was a foreigner, unfamiliar with the area, so it was possible she had gotten lost. Thus, the police reopened the search as a typical missing person case. Meanwhile, Ms. Guo's husband and her son, Tang Yuangzi, held frequent press conferences while also wandering around, posting missing person flyers everywhere. Many Vancouver residents were moved by the father and son's persistence and began helping distribute flyers and organizing small search parties to track down Ms. Guo. While the entire country of Canada was frantically searching for the missing woman, a few seasoned police officers noticed something odd. The city of Vancouver, Canada, is not large, covering an area of about 115 square kilometers, less than 1% of the size of China's capital. Logically speaking, finding someone in such a small city should not have been this difficult. Moreover, Ms. Guo was an Asian woman with distinctive features who did not speak the language, so why had weeks of extensive searching yielded no clues whatsoever? Piecing together these details, the officers speculated that this might not be a simple missing person case. As time passed and the case failed to progress as Ms. Guo's family had hoped, her husband returned to China to attend to business, leaving her son Tang Yuangzi to continue searching for his mother. On July 29, police suddenly received a call reporting the discovery of a foul-smelling suitcase on an island northwest of Vancouver. Inside was the heavily decomposed body of a woman. The victim was a middle-aged Asian woman whose face had become unrecognizable, making identification by appearance difficult. According to the autopsy results, the victim's skull was fractured with large holes, and the cause of death was determined to be multiple blows to the head with a blunt object, such as a hammer. After conducting genetic testing, police concluded that the victim was Ms. Guo, the woman who had been missing for several months. At this point, the missing person case officially became a murder investigation. The case was quickly handed over to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police (RCMP), the country's premier investigative force. Based on initial evidence and information, police quickly ruled out the possibility that Ms. Guo was the victim of a robbery or personal vendetta. Ms. Guo was a foreigner who had been in Canada for less than 2 weeks, carried few valuable possessions, and had no complex social ties in the country. The woman's appearance was not attention-grabbing, so the likelihood of her being the target of a random attack was very low. After determining that Ms. Guo's death did not involve a third party, police focused their suspicions on the 2 individuals who had the closest and most frequent contact with Ms. Guo during her time in Canada, her husband and her son. However, Ms. Guo's husband had already returned to China, leaving only her son, Tang Yuanxi, still in Canada. As a result, police decided to summon Yuanxi first for questioning. Ultimately, which of the 2 men had caused Ms. Guo's death? When Tang Yuanxi initially reported his mother's disappearance, he stated that on the day of the incident, he had driven to the hotel to pick up his mother and take her to the airport. This statement led police to mistakenly believe that Yuanxi lived elsewhere, far from the hotel where his parents were staying, and had only gone there that day to send Ms. Guo off. However, upon deeper investigation, police uncovered a suspicious and contradictory detail. In reality, Yuanxi also had a room in the same hotel where Ms. Guo disappeared. His room was separated from his mother's by only 1 wall. It was strange that during the entire reporting process, Yuanxi had not mentioned being so close to his mother's room, or hearing or seeing anything unusual on the day she disappeared. To experienced investigators, this was highly unusual. Typically, when a loved one goes missing, witnesses would provide as much detailed information as possible, hoping the police could find clues. Yuanxi's omission of this critical information only deepened police suspicions that he was hiding something. When questioned about withholding important information, Yuanxi showed no signs of nervousness or concern. Instead, he calmly responded, even asking the police, "Why didn't you ask me directly at the time?" From their years of investigative experience, police concluded that Yuanxi was highly likely to know something about the murder. However, to arrest him, they needed more concrete evidence. To determine if Yuanxi displayed any other suspicious behavior, police decided to let him go while planning a visit to his residence to search for additional clues. One morning, when Yuanxi least expected it, the investigative team suddenly knocked on his door unannounced. Would they find evidence there to finally bring the truth to light? Once inside, police used the pretense of questioning to begin searching the room, hoping to uncover useful leads. Initially, investigators did not expect to find much evidence there and mostly asked basic questions, many of which had already been addressed previously. However, unexpectedly, Tang Yuanxi's answers this time were significantly different from his previous statements, raising fresh doubts in the investigators' minds. When pressed about the inconsistencies, Tang Yuanxi quickly explained that his English skills were poor, causing him to misunderstand the police's questions and provide incorrect answers. However, this excuse was unconvincing. Tang Yuanxi had lived in Canada for 6 years, and his claim of not fully understanding English made the investigators scoff. While one officer continued questioning, another began a more thorough search of the room. In a hidden corner near the bed, they discovered a small dried blood stain that appeared to have been cleaned, but still left traces. The officer immediately used an LSK fluorescent light to examine the area more closely. The test revealed strong blood traces on the floor, walls, bed, and closet. The room was quickly identified as the site of a typical homicide. In fact, just 14 days after Ms. Guo went missing, the police already suspected that she might have been murdered, which is why the case was transferred to the mounted police. The discovery of blood traces in Tang Yuanxi's bedroom further strengthened the theory that this room was the initial crime scene. Now that blood had been found in Tang Yuanxi's bedroom, this reinforced the police's suspicions. However, these were still just police speculations. Whether or not the blood belonged to Ms. Guo still needed to be confirmed through testing. At the time, the police did not have sufficient grounds to obtain a search warrant, nor could they collect blood samples, leaving them powerless. The police knew there was something off about this dutiful son, but they had no way to act on it. The Canadian police realized that to get Yuangxi to confess to his crime, they needed a special strategy. After many discussions, they decided to stage a dramatic ruse. A female Chinese police officer was chosen to pose as a gangster who had accidentally found crucial evidence related to the case. The undercover officer contacted Yuangxi by phone, claiming she had found a body on a beach that matched the clothing and description of Yuangxi's mother from the missing person. Notice. She said that if Yuangxi paid her enough money, she could help him deal with the body. Yuangxi immediately felt uneasy. If he agreed, it would indirectly admit his guilt. Thus, he said nothing and prepared to hang up the phone, but the officer quickly added that she knew Yuangxi was responsible for his mother's death and that she would help him cover it up, for a price. Tang Yuangxi began to feel flustered because this woman seemed to know things only he and the police could know. He decided to meet her at a coffee shop. The two arranged to meet at a cafe. As soon as Yuangxi entered, he saw the woman covered in tattoos, with piercings on her ears, nose, and other places, and hair dyed in multiple colors. Sitting next to her was a middle-aged man in a leather jacket who introduced himself as a member of the Triads, accompanied by a group of young men with intimidating expressions. In the tense atmosphere, the man said to Yuangxi, "To clean this up neatly, we need to know every detail of your crime." Under psychological pressure, and believing he was dealing with a real criminal gang, Tang Yuangxi confessed everything without realizing that the people in front of him were all police officers and that the entire conversation was being recorded. But his words sent chills down the spines of the police officers. In addition to confessing to killing his mother and agreeing to pay for the disposal of her body, he made another shocking request. Yuangxi said he would pay extra to hire the gang to kill his father, promising to share his inheritance with them once he received it. No one could have imagined that a seemingly mild-mannered young man would not only kill his mother, but now also hire someone to kill his father. These chilling statements were all recorded by the undercover officer's device. The police quickly arrested Yuangxi. At first, Yuangxi adamantly denied his crimes until the police confirmed that blood traces found in his apartment and car belonged to Ms. Guo. At that point, Yuangxi finally admitted to his crimes and revealed some details about the murder. He bluntly stated that the reason he killed his mother was entirely because of her oppressive behavior. "I took the hammer from my bag and attacked her. She struggled a bit, then she tried to push me away, and then I finished her off." Yuangxi calmly described to the jury how he used the hammer to kill his mother. Seeing blood pooling and spreading on the floor, Yuangxi admitted he was so scared that he sat on the floor for about 15 minutes before checking whether his mother was still breathing. At first, he didn't know what to do with the body and searched the internet for ways to dispose of it. However, he thought the suggested methods were too cruel. Therefore, the murderer decided to stuff the victim's body into a suitcase and place the suitcase in a storage closet, along with the hammer used in the crime. Yuangxi admitted to killing his mother, but showed no remorse. On the contrary, he claimed that it was her actions that drove him to murder. So what exactly did Ms. Guo do? What caused an otherwise ordinary young man to develop such terrifying thoughts? Tang Yuangxi, born in 1987 in Foshan, Guangdong, was the only child of a wealthy family. His mother, Guo Lianji, was a strong-willed and controlling woman, often described as a tiger mom. From a young age, Tang Yuangxi lived under his mother's strict discipline. Ms. Guo believed that a tough approach to parenting would ensure her son's success in life. Ms. Guo was convinced that academic performance was everything. On one occasion, when Yuangxi's test scores failed to meet her expectations, she not only scolded him harshly, but also locked him in his study without food or drink. She made Yuangxi repeatedly answer questions, and forced him to promise that he would achieve perfect scores in the next exam. The mother did not let up and continued to pressure him until Yuangxi swore to meet her demands. It wasn't just academics. Everything in Yuangxi's life was tightly controlled, from what he wore to who he befriended, and even the small games he played. Ms. Guo interfered in every aspect. If Yuangxi disobeyed or went against her wishes, the consequences were endless scolding or even physical punishment. Under his mother's oppressive control, Yuangxi gradually lost all freedom. He lived in constant fear and pressure, unable to resist or express his thoughts. Over time, this suffocating control led to severe psychological effects. Yuangxi began to feel depressed, lonely, and resentful toward his mother. He no longer saw his mother as someone who cared for or loved him, but as a prison warden. Slowly, a simmering hatred grew in Yuangxi's heart. The relationship between Yuangxi and Ms. Guo did not improve even as he grew older. His resentment only deepened, but Yuangxi continued to feign obedience and hide his inner rebellion. In high school, Yuangxi fell in love with a classmate. The two had promised to get into the same university and build a bright future together. However, this relationship was quickly and harshly opposed by Yuangxi's mother, who disapproved of the girl's family background and deemed her unworthy of her son. Ms. Guo forced Yuangxi to end the relationship immediately. Unable to resist the pressure, Yuangxi outwardly complied and announced their breakup, but he secretly could not let go of his feelings. In 2006, at the age of 19, Yuangxi was sent to Canada to study, following his mother's wishes. Ms. Guo believed that studying abroad was the only path to success. Initially, upon arriving in Canada, Yuangxi felt a sense of relief, but this comfort didn't last long. In an unfamiliar place, with no friends or family, Yuangxi was soon overwhelmed by loneliness and helplessness. He struggled to adapt to his new environment and found it difficult to make friends. One day, Yuangxi mustered the courage to call his parents to share his feelings. He hoped for encouragement or comfort, but instead, Ms. Guo scolded him harshly. The years Yuangxi spent in Canada brought him no joy or accomplishments. His English skills didn't improve significantly, his academic performance declined, and he lost the motivation to continue. At one point, Yuangxi began considering abandoning everything and returning to China. However, his mother once again crushed her son's hopes. Ms. Guo firmly demanded that Yuangxi stay in Vancouver and do whatever it took to obtain residency status. With limited English proficiency and no work visa, Yuangxi faced many difficulties finding a job in Canada. Without a stable source of income, he relied entirely on financial support from his parents to cover living expenses. However, this dependency only worsened the tension between him and his mother. In desperation, Yuangxi began lying to his parents. He told them he had obtained permanent residency in Canada, but in reality, he was still extending his tourist visa. This initial lie gave him temporary relief, but also forced him to continuously fabricate more stories to cover up the truth. On May 19, 2012, Yuangxi's parents decided to visit him in Canada. Ms. Guo even took the initiative to arrange a matchmaking meeting for Yuangxi with a girl she deemed suitable. What Yuangxi's parents didn't know was that during his 6 years in Canada, he had multiple short-term romantic relationships. Yuangxi had dated several women in Vancouver, but had never disclosed this to his family. To maintain the image of an obedient son in his parents' eyes, Yuangxi repeatedly lied about his life. He told them he lived with an elderly couple to hide the fact that he was actually sharing an apartment with a young woman. Before his parents' visit, Yuangxi used the money they had sent him to indulge his girlfriend's preferences, leaving just enough to rent a car. The car he used to pick up his parents was actually a rental. To justify his previous lies, Yuangxi had to craft increasingly elaborate stories. He struggled to maintain the facade of being a successful, stable son, while secretly living in constant fear that all his secrets would be exposed. Before returning to China, Ms. Guo asked Yuangxi to move their luggage from the hotel to the apartment where he was staying. She wanted to verify whether his roommate was male or female. The woman quickly discovered the truth. Her son was not living with an elderly couple as he had claimed. This realization enraged her, and she felt deeply betrayed by Yuangxi's lies. Yuangxi refused to back down. He felt that he was an adult, entitled to make his own decisions, and no longer needed his mother to interfere in his personal life. However, Ms. Guo disagreed, and the two had a heated argument. Years of pent-up emotions finally erupted, culminating in a horrifying crime. To cover up the truth, Yuangxi even considered killing his father, who was still unaware of the situation. He went so far as to devise a plan to stage an accident to make the deaths of both parents look like an unfortunate mishap. Fortunately, Yuangxi ultimately abandoned this plan. When the truth about Ms. Guo's death came to light, Yuangxi's father was devastated. However, he chose to forgive his son. The father wrote a letter expressing sympathy and hoped the court would show leniency toward Yuangxi. In the letter, the killer's father and the victim's husband emphasized that his son's actions were the result of a moment of lost control. He also stated that the case was the consequence of family pressure, excessive expectations, and unresolved conflicts between mother and son. As for the killer, when police asked him if he regretted his actions, Yuangxi adamantly replied that he did not, and said, "If my mother hadn't died, I would never have been happy." The local court convicted Yuangxi of second-degree murder during the initial trial, ruling that he would not be eligible for parole for 10 years. However, just 1 month later, the final sentence was revised, extending the period of ineligibility for parole to 17 years. According to the ruling, Tang Yuangxi would serve his sentence until 2029 before being eligible to apply for clemency. Thank you for listening to our case story today. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to follow more gripping cases. Just a few days before Lunar New Year, the drainage system of an apartment building in Luzhou became clogged, spreading a foul stench everywhere, and people started blaming irresponsible littering, until they discovered that what was stuck in the pipes wasn't pork but human flesh. From there, a horrifying secret was uncovered. Disjointed body parts mixed with household waste were flushed down the toilet. The number of victims exceeded 10, all of them women. The serial killings in Luzhou City, Guangxi Province, shocked the entire nation and turned this once peaceful community into a notorious place. Though more than 2 decades have passed, some details of this gruesome case remain deeply imprinted in the memories of locals. Some people have even stopped eating organ stew because the murderer used this dish as a guise for their crimes. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of our latest videos. Early that morning, residents of a small apartment building in Luzhou, Guangxi Province, China, welcomed a new couple who had just moved to the 5th floor of the building. They introduced themselves as Zhang Yang and Tan Dongmei, owners of an organ stew food cart near the market. The couple's simplicity and friendliness quickly won the affection of their neighbors. In a short time, Zhang Yang and his wife quickly adapted to life there. The neighbors also grew fond of the couple for their friendliness and their willingness to help whenever needed. However, there was one strange thing. Since the Zhang couple moved in, the building's sewage pipes had frequently become clogged. The foul odor from the clogged drains became a constant topic of daily conversations among the residents and often left them irritated and frustrated. Zhang Yang proactively took responsibility, explaining that due to their organ stew business, pork scraps, leftover grease, and some spoiled meat had been flushed down the toilet because they didn't know how else to dispose of them. Zhang Yang confessed with an apologetic expression. He even volunteered to unclog the pipes and promised not to let it happen again. Some neighbors also noticed a strange smell always lingering around Zhang Yong's apartment. He claimed it was the smell of meat, but no one could determine what kind of meat could smell so foul. Especially on hot days, the stench became so overwhelming that some couldn't even eat their meals. A few neighbors whispered about it, but Zhang Yong's polite demeanor and sincerity prevented them from blaming him further. About a week later, on a quiet evening, Zhang Yong and his wife Tan Dongmei were busy in the bathroom when they suddenly heard an urgent knock at the door. Startled, Tan Dongmei's eyes showed fear as she tightly gripped Zhang Yong's hand. However, he frowned with a look of annoyance, muttering angrily before heading to open the door. Standing at the door was an elderly neighbor from the adjacent apartment, her face full of irritation. She complained that her drain was clogged again, and the recurring issue was severely disrupting her family's daily life. She demanded that Zhang Yong stop flushing meat scraps or leftovers down the drain because it was unhygienic and caused inconvenience for the entire building. Zhang Yong simply stood there, nodding politely and repeatedly apologizing. As soon as the old lady turned and left, the smile on Zhang Yong's face disappeared. His expression darkened. He slammed the door shut and quickly returned to the bathroom. Zhang Yong urged Dongmei to hurry, and the two of them resumed their unfinished task. Inside the room, the scene was horrifying. The couple was dealing with a corpse. Red paint was smeared across the floor, pooling and flowing into the drain. The body was dismembered, but still recognizable as a woman. Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei showed no panic. Instead, they appeared completely calm. Zhang Yong, holding a knife, worked with a professional demeanor, as if he were butchering animal meat. A few days before Lunar New Year, the building was filled with joy and a festive atmosphere. Residents were busy preparing for the new year, hanging lanterns, and putting up red spring couplets. However, residents suddenly noticed a strange stench and realized the drains were clogged again. Unable to tolerate it any longer, they blamed Zhang Yong on the 5th floor, accusing his organ stew business of causing the recurring sewage issues by dumping spoiled meat down the drain. Some neighbors, realizing the severity of the problem, teamed up to find the building manager. After being informed, the manager personally went to Zhang Yong and demanded that he immediately resolve the drainage issue. Facing public criticism, Zhang Yong did not evade responsibility and chose to cooperate with the neighbors to fix the problem. Zhang Yong decided to visit the labor market to hire a worker to unclog the drains. Unlike others, he deliberately searched for an older, frail, and slow worker. After much searching, his eyes settled on an elderly laborer. The man, an immigrant worker about 50 years old, had mostly white hair and wore a shabby green uniform. His appearance suggested years of farming experience. Zhang Yong silently observed the old man, concluding that he was likely less perceptive and might be the most suitable person for the job. Zhang Yong approached and spoke with the old man. After agreeing on a price, the man followed Zhang Yong to the apartment building to start work. Upon arriving, Zhang Yong led the worker to the clogged drain and asked if he could find a way to clear it. The old man nodded, picked up his tools, and began working. Zhang Yong believed the man, being a naive rural worker, wouldn't notice anything unusual. Confident, he left the old man to work alone. It didn't take long for the worker to find the source of the blockage. Within minutes, he pulled out a heap of waste from the pipes. Among the waste, he noticed some ground meat mixed with filth. Zhang Yong's explanation about his organ stew business made the old man dismiss it and quietly continue working. But then, as he probed deeper into the pipe, the old man pulled out a larger piece of meat. Staring at it, he couldn't help but feel puzzled. This old worker had previously been involved in combat support during the war, responsible for transporting wounded soldiers and the remains of the fallen. He had witnessed numerous soldiers with limbs blown off by artillery and landmines, and was very familiar with the anatomy of human limbs. Upon seeing this piece of meat, he immediately noticed something odd. It looked exactly like a human thigh, reminiscent of the ones he had seen before. Horrified, he realized it had come from the drain. The old man muttered to himself, wondering if someone had killed a person and dumped the body down the pipes. His heart pounded, his body turned cold, and he struggled to stay calm. But what happened next made him unable to stand. From the drain, a human scalp, complete with long, shiny black hair, slowly floated out. This was unmistakably not from any animal. Without a moment's hesitation, the old man abandoned his tools, bag, and everything he had brought. He ran straight out of the building and headed to the nearest police station. The old man didn't dare stay any longer, knowing he had uncovered a horrifying crime. The police reacted with heightened alertness upon hearing what initially sounded like an absurd report. While the claim seemed unbelievable at first, their professional instincts prevented them from dismissing it. An investigation team was dispatched to the scene immediately, accompanied by forensic experts and specialized equipment, prepared to face whatever awaited them. When detectives arrived at the scene, they were shocked at the pile of meat extracted from the pipes. After careful examination, they were horrified to realize that these remains belonged not just to one person, but to multiple individuals. The police proceeded to retrieve all the remnants from the apartment building's drainage system and septic tank. After a preliminary forensic examination, it was concluded that the body parts belonged to at least 4 victims. Based on muscle structure, bone size, and other characteristics, the experts identified that all 4 victims were female. The body parts showed varying stages of decomposition. One victim appeared to have been murdered just days earlier, while the other 3 had been dead for 3 to 4 months. This was an extremely brutal and barbaric murder case. The perpetrator disposed of the bodies through the sewage system and into the septic tank to eliminate evidence. Based on the frequency of clogs reported by the residents, the number of victims was estimated to be no fewer than 10. With only the limited information provided by the elderly worker, the police faced a major obstacle. The old man didn't know the name of the person who hired him, nor which floor they lived on, only that the individual was a resident of the building. Given the severity of the case involving multiple victims, the investigation team couldn't afford to waste time. The police immediately deployed reinforcements and began searching each apartment in the building. When questioning residents, everyone mentioned Zhang Yong, the man on the 5th floor, who was infamous in the building for repeatedly causing drainage issues. Without hesitation, the police went to Zhang Yong's apartment. But there was no response from inside. Sensing something unusual about the silence, the police quickly used a crowbar to break open Zhang Yong's metal door, determined to uncover the truth within. When the door was forced open, Zhang Yong and his wife, Tan Dongmei, were not at home. It appeared the couple had fled before the police arrived. As soon as the officers entered the bathroom, they discovered numerous suspicious signs. A strong stench of red paint and rotting flesh lingered in the air. Although the bathroom had been scrubbed clean, small red paint splatters were still visible on the walls. Behind the bathroom door was a large axe. The blade appeared well used, polished to a shine. The detectives continued their thorough search of the apartment. In the kitchen, they found a large set of kitchen knives, some specifically designed for cutting meat. To their horror, one of the knives still had traces of dried red paint, clearly not fully cleaned. With all these findings, Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei were immediately placed at the top of the suspect list. An emergency warrant was issued, and the police vowed to bring the couple to justice before any more victims could be harmed. After questioning the neighbors and the landlord, the police gathered some information about Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei. The couple had been living there for over a year. They rarely went out and seemed to have no stable jobs, with their financial situation appearing to be poor. However, with their friendly demeanor and low-profile lifestyle, Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei had never aroused anyone's suspicion about their daily lives. Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei were quickly apprehended by the police and brought to the station for interrogation. At the investigation headquarters, Zhang Yong revealed his true nature as a cold, dangerous individual. His face remained expressionless, his eyes downcast, avoiding direct eye contact with the investigators. During questioning, he only mumbled vague responses or remained completely silent. Zhang's stubbornness and defiance frustrated the detectives. He fully understood the gravity of his crimes and knew that, whether he confessed or not, the death penalty was almost unavoidable. Unable to extract any information from Zhang Yong, the police turned to his wife, Tan Dongmei. Unlike her husband, Tan Dongmei could not hide the worry evident in her eyes and gestures. At first, she adamantly denied any involvement, but her statements failed to satisfy the investigators, who knew that with a crime this heinous, Tan Dongmei could not be innocent. During the interrogation, an experienced officer suddenly noticed a fresh wound on Tan Dongmei's left hand, a long, deep cut that was showing signs of infection. Leaning closer to Dongmei, the officer's piercing gaze was accompanied by a chilling whisper. "Do you see it? Karma has already found you. The restless spirits of your victims won't let you go. They're coming for revenge." Those words struck Dongmei like a dagger to her psyche. Her shoulders began to tremble, and she broke down in tears, sobbing as she confessed all the crimes she and her husband had committed. It turned out that the Zhang couple never ran an organ stew business, as they had claimed. Zhang Yong was a compulsive gambler who spent his days at the mahjong table and nights frequenting bars and nightclubs. The motivation behind their crimes was purely financial. Even if the victims carried only small amounts of money, once they entered Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei's home, they would never leave alive. The investigators in the interrogation room were stunned by Tan Dongmei's confession. They exchanged glances, their faces showing disbelief and shock. How could a seemingly ordinary couple like Zhang Yong and Tan Dongmei commit such monstrous crimes? At the time, Tan Dongmei was 37 years old, and Zhang Yong was 31. They were living in an era of widespread hardship, as waves of layoffs left millions of workers unemployed. Everywhere, people scrambled to find jobs, but not everyone succeeded. Zhang Yong, a man born and raised in the city, was among the unlucky ones. Unlike many who were willing to take up manual labor to survive, Zhang Yong refused to lower himself to such work. His pride and ego wouldn't allow him to take on what he considered menial jobs. Initially, the couple survived on a small amount of savings, enough to get by for a while. But before long, that money ran out. Life became increasingly difficult. Day by day, Tan Dongmei's eyes were filled with worry as she stared at their empty fridge and the mounting unpaid bills. One evening, after going hungry all day, Tan Dongmei's anger exploded as she saw Zhang Yong lounging on a chair, idly shaking his legs and showing no intention of finding work. She began berating her husband, demanding that he go out and find a job, or else they would starve. Zhang Yong remained calm. Leaning back in his chair, his eyes glinted with a cold, inexplicable light as he declared that he had a solution. Little did Dongmei know that Zhang Yong's solution was murder. That night, Dongmei saw Zhang Yong bring home a young woman named Chen, around 20 years old, who was stylishly dressed and wearing gold jewelry. Zhang Yong had met the woman while playing mahjong outside and invited her to his home to play cards that evening. At first, Chen felt a bit hesitant, but upon seeing Dongmei at home, her guard dropped. Shortly after, Zhang Yong handed her a glass of water laced with sleeping pills he had prepared. Although Chen initially remarked that the water tasted a bit strange, she drank it all without hesitation. The drug quickly took effect, and Chen fell asleep on the sofa. She would never wake up again. Zhang Yong rummaged through the victim's bag, but found only $20, no mobile phone, and no valuable possessions. Disappointed and enraged, he cursed continuously. At that moment, Tan Dong-mei, still holding on to a shred of humanity, suggested taking the unconscious woman back to her home, hoping to end the ordeal. But Zhang Yong refused. He argued that robbery, given the current circumstances, would be punished severely. If caught, both of them could face 7 to 8 years in prison. He'd rather kill than risk imprisonment. Zhang's words terrified Tan Dong-mei. She tried to calm her husband down, but Zhang Yong's cold, determined gaze made it clear. He was resolved to kill the unfortunate girl. Overwhelmed with fear and despair, Dong-mei had no choice but to follow her husband's orders. Together, they strangled the victim. Drugged and unable to resist or cry out, the young woman quietly took her last breath. However, living in a small city apartment, it was impossible for the Zhangs to transport the body outside without being noticed. Zhang Yong decided that the only option was to dismember the body and flush the pieces down the drain. The larger bones and the victim's clothing were stuffed into plastic bags, which Zhang disposed of in the suburbs the following day. Yet the money gained from their first robbery was minimal. With only $20 sand, some low-value jewelry, Zhang Yong and Dong-mei barely survived for a month. Poverty struck again, and this time, Zhang Yong made a bold decision to continue killing. Horrifically, the couple rationalized that since they were already guilty of murder, killing one person or dozens would lead to the same outcome. Thus, they had no hesitation in committing more murders. The total number of victims reached 10, all of them women, including Zhang Yong's ex-girlfriend. Most were migrants from other provinces, newly arrived in Guangxi for work, and had not registered their residency. The victims shared a common profile. They frequented bars and nightclubs and led relatively carefree lifestyles. As a result, their disappearances went unnoticed. Some had been dead for a long time before their families learned of their fate through the police. According to Tan Dong-mei, these 10 victims were all she knew of during the time they lived together. As for how many people Zhang Yong had killed before, she claimed she didn't know. When asked why she didn't report the crimes to the police, Dong-mei said she feared becoming Zhang Yong's next victim. Furthermore, with neither of them holding steady jobs, Dong-mei relied on the money Zhang obtained from his murders to survive. Initially, Dong-mei was scared, but as Zhang Yong's killing frequency increased, she became desensitized. Over time, she unknowingly became Zhang Yong's willing accomplice. Experienced officers shook their heads in disappointment. 10 people? On average, the couple killed one person per month. How could they live with such horrifying crimes? Zhang Yong and Tan Dong-mei, with their gruesome string of murders, were sentenced to death. It was an inevitable punishment, fitting for the heinous acts committed by these two monsters. However, the families of all 10 victims received no compensation, as the murderous couple had no assets whatsoever. The crimes of Zhang Yong and Tan Dong-mei were truly terrifying. The lure of money often leads people astray. The ultimate fate of the Zhang couple serves as a harsh lesson for anyone blinded by greed and selfishness. Thank you for listening to today's crime story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more gripping cases. After experiencing blood in her urine, along with persistent dull pain, a woman went to the doctor and was shocked to discover 26 sewing needles inside her body. Where did these needles come from, and how long had they been inside her body? No one could have imagined that behind this case lay a horrifying secret about a crime so chilling it gave everyone goosebumps upon learning the truth. What happened to this woman? Who secretly inserted these needles into her body? And for what purpose? Were they able to find the culprit responsible for this tragedy? And how is the woman's life now? Join us as we unravel the mystery of this thrilling story, filled with continuous plot twists about the perpetrator that no one could have predicted. Before we begin the story, Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive notifications whenever there's a new video. This true story took place in Luoshuidong Village, Yunnan Province, China. The main character of today's story is Luo Kuifan, a farmer from Yanglin Town, Songming County. Luo Kuifan married Zhou Zhengrong in 2000, and they had a son. Her in-laws were very kind to her. Every day she worked in the fields and stayed home to take care of her child and her elderly parents, while her husband worked at a quarry. Although their family life wasn't very affluent, the couple lived in harmony. Because of her year-round farm work, she occasionally felt aches and pains, but never sought medical attention, thinking they were just minor, normal discomforts. On October 18, Luo Kuifan woke up early as usual to prepare breakfast for her husband, child, and elderly mother. Suddenly, she experienced severe pain in her lower abdomen and back. Thinking it was constipation, she went to the bathroom. As she squatted down, the pain became even more intense. After relieving herself, she was horrified to see bright red urine mixed with blood clots and screamed loudly. Hearing his wife's cries, Zhou Zhengrong rushed over. Seeing her pale face, he immediately asked her what had happened. After hearing his wife describe her condition, he promptly took her to the local community health center. Due to limited medical resources, the community health center could only treat common illnesses. They suggested the couple go to a larger hospital for a more thorough examination. Zhou Zhengrong returned home, packed their belongings, and then took a bus with his wife to the First People's Hospital of Yunnan Province. After listening to the couple describe the symptoms, the doctor suggested an X-ray, and the results left everyone stunned. To confirm the findings, the doctor magnified the X-ray images and carefully examined the foreign objects in the woman's body. The objects were sharp but thin at one end, with the other end relatively thick and featuring a small hole. These were sewing needles. In one of the X-ray films, over 10 needles were visible, but the doctors suspected there could be even more. As a result, they requested a comprehensive X-ray scan to obtain the most accurate report. The results shocked them even further. A total of 26 sewing needles were distributed throughout the victim's body, from her head, neck, liver, and kidneys to her legs. Notably, a needle near her neck was extremely close to the aorta. If it shifted even slightly, her life could be in danger. Even more frightening, the needle in her brain was like a ticking time bomb. When the doctor informed them of the results, Luo Kuifan and her husband were so terrified they almost fell off their chairs. She couldn't accept this reality, as she had never imagined that her body could contain 26 sewing needles without her knowing. According to Luo Kuifan, she frequently experienced pain in her chest, abdomen, and legs. However, these pains were only dull and temporary, not significantly affecting her daily life. Based on the condition of the needles, doctors determined that they had been inserted into Luo Kuifan's body a very long time ago, possibly when she was just a few years old. Considering the patient's condition, the doctors were amazed that she had survived and could even perform heavy labor despite having 26 needles throughout her body. After the hospital's leadership reviewed Luo Kuifan's medical report, they immediately formed a specialized team to provide her with advice. They all agreed on a surgical plan to remove the 26 needles. However, this procedure was easier said than done. The needles in the patient's body were spread across various parts, with some located in particularly sensitive areas. If the surgery were rushed, it could threaten her life. Of the 26 needles, one was very close to an artery in her brain, and another was near her heart. Hearing about the dangerous surgery, Luo Kuifan squatted on the ground in fear and despair, crying uncontrollably. Seeing his wife lose her composure, Zhou Zhengrong listened to the doctor's advice and agreed to proceed with the surgery. However, when the couple learned that the cost of the surgeries would be 300,000 yuan, they were both stunned. This was an enormous amount for the couple. Both were farmers who relied on their land for a living year-round. With low rice yields, their family could only save between 1,000 to 2,000 yuan per year. Facing such a financial reality, the couple discussed and decided to temporarily postpone the surgery. Ever since learning that she had 26 needles in her body, Luo Qifen avoided going anywhere or doing heavy labor, fearing it might worsen her condition. Even when her son wanted to come close and hug her, she cruelly refused, afraid that the needles might shift and endanger her life at any moment. Despite her caution, she occasionally still experienced blood in her urine and abdominal pain. With her family already struggling financially, she refrained from visiting major hospitals for treatment and only went to local clinics to get prescriptions for blood-stopping medications. Seeing his wife deteriorate due to her illness, Zhou Zhengrong felt utterly helpless and began asking relatives and friends for loans to cover medical expenses. However, since everyone else was in a similar financial situation, he could only return home disappointed. Out of love for his wife, this man even tried various folk remedies, but none were successful. The 26 needles embedded in her body caused her immense physical and mental suffering. Although she was only 28 years old, she looked no different from someone aged 48. Although the family couldn't afford the full cost of removing all 26 needles, she still hoped to undergo a few simpler surgeries to remove the needles in the most critical areas. Clinging to this hope, she visited several major hospitals to inquire. However, when the doctors saw her X-ray films, they all shook their heads. After numerous failed attempts, the couple gradually lost hope. Luo Qifen's strange illness quickly became a topic of interest in the village. Shortly afterward, the media learned about the case and came to Luo Qifen's village to investigate the situation. In addition to seeking ways to help this woman cover the cost of her surgery, the public was deeply interested in the question: who was the perpetrator that inserted these needles into her body? According to the doctor's analysis, the needles had been secretly inserted into various parts of her body when she was still a child. Thus, the only people who could have been close to Luo Qifen at that time were her relatives. At this point, the elderly mother caring for Luo Qifen suddenly became serious and recounted events from 30 years ago. Sugiwa, Luo Qifen's mother, revealed that she had discovered 2 needles in her daughter's body when she was a child. When her daughter was a few years old, she cried excessively because of a sore on her buttocks. Wanting to help, the mother tried to squeeze out the pus with her hands. Unexpectedly, a sharp needle emerged from the sore. However, at the time, she thought it was just an accident and didn't give it much thought. Not long after, another sore appeared on her daughter's abdomen. This time, she found another needle in the infected wound. Fortunately, after the needles were removed, Luo Qifen's body gradually healed, but her mother had no idea that dozens of other needles remained inside her daughter. While everyone was still speculating about the culprit, her mother named someone that left everyone astonished. It was Yang Mingkong, Luo Qifen's biological father. However, Luo Qifen had no emotional connection to this man and didn't even carry his surname. Sugiwa had married Yang Mingkong and had 2 daughters with him. However, her in-laws were backward and old-fashioned. Because she didn't give birth to a son, her in-laws constantly berated and insulted the unfortunate woman. Since she had to work in the fields, she could only leave her 2 daughters at home in the care of her husband and in-laws. However, Yang Mingkong, following his parents' views, constantly scolded his wife and daughters for not producing a male heir. Furthermore, he shamelessly brought young women home to drink and sing. After being beaten and verbally abused by her husband multiple times, Sugiwa grew tired of her situation and filed for divorce. When their second daughter, Luo Qifen, was only 3 years old. After the divorce, she took her 2 daughters and left her ex-husband's house, later remarrying a farmer. This man didn't mind that she had been previously married, and instead loved her 2 daughters dearly. As a result, Luo Qifen grew up healthy and safe under the love and care of her mother and stepfather. Sugiwa suspected that her ex-husband was the one who had inserted the needles into her unfortunate daughter. However, when the media tracked down Yang Mingkong, he denied the accusation. The middle-aged man stated that although Luo Kuifan was his biological daughter, no matter how patriarchal he was, he would never commit such a cruel act. Upon hearing that his daughter was ill, after many years of neither seeing nor caring for her, Yang Mingkong came to visit and tearfully apologized. He regretfully admitted that he had not been a good father and, due to outdated beliefs, had only wished for a son to carry on the family name. Besides her ex-husband, Su Giwa also suspected two other people, the paternal grandparents of Luo Kuifan. When Luo Kuifan was a child, it was her grandparents who cared for her while her mother worked in the fields. She suspected her grandfather might have done this because the first time her granddaughter fell ill, he suddenly inquired about her, even though he usually disliked her. After Luo Kuifan developed more specific symptoms, he never asked about her condition again. In Luo Kuifan's memory, her grandfather was a somewhat strange person and suffered from memory issues. As her condition worsened, her grandfather became frail with age. Before he passed away, he would frequently mutter strange things and plead for forgiveness. However, the family never asked for specifics, assuming he was rambling due to his memory loss. Now that Luo Kuifan's grandfather has long passed away, the question of who inserted the needles into her body as a child has been buried with him. Luo Kuifan's grandmother, who was deeply superstitious, was also a prime suspect. However, she too had passed away long ago, leaving the mystery unresolved. No one knows whether the culprit was the patient's biological father or her grandparents, who clung to outdated beliefs and only valued male heirs. Many internet users speculated that Luo Kuifan's biological father likely knows the truth best. It's possible that Yang Mingkong knew his own father had done it, but didn't dare confirm it out of fear of being accused of filial disrespect. After a long time investigating the culprit behind this tragedy, without achieving conclusive results, Luo Kuifan became increasingly despondent. What concerned her most was having the money to undergo surgeries, as the longer she waited, the more her life was at risk. Her case was reported by the media, immediately drawing nationwide attention, including from medical experts. After 3 years of effort since learning about her condition, Luo Kuifan finally received good news in 2007. In August 2007, the director of Richland Hospital in Kunming, Yunnan Province, reached out to the couple. They announced that they would perform the surgeries free of charge. Luo Kuifan and her family wept with joy upon hearing the news. Thus, the woman who had been tormented by 26 needles for nearly 30 years finally had a chance to be freed from them. The happiest person was Luo Kuifan's husband, knowing that his wife had been given a chance to be saved. However, when she was admitted to the hospital, the surgeons discovered that some of the needles in her body were shifting, posing potential risks during the operation. Nevertheless, Luo Kuifan no longer cared about the risks. She had waited for this day for 3 years and was ready to gamble with death. Rather than waiting to die, she wanted to proceed with the surgery despite the potential dangers. Understanding the patient's determination, the hospital's experts decided to give their all and devised a strict surgical plan. The initial order of the surgery was the pelvic region, lower back and abdomen, head and neck, right leg, and chest. On September 11 of the same year, Luo Kuifan underwent her first surgery. In this operation, the doctors aimed to remove 6 needles from her abdomen that had caused her to pass blood in her urine. As predicted, the needles were encased in body tissue and could not be seen with the naked eye. The doctors had to rely solely on their gloved hands to feel for the location of the needles. After 2 hours of intensive searching, the doctors successfully removed 6 needles from her abdomen. To reduce the number of surgeries and with the family's consent, the doctors decided to continue removing as many needles as possible from the upper abdomen. In the end, they extracted an additional 7 needles from her upper abdomen. Thus, a total of 13 needles were removed from Luo Kuifan's body. These needles were farther from vital organs, making their removal relatively easier. After their removal, The doctors were shocked to see that the steel needles varied in length and thickness and were in a state of rust. During the recovery period, Luo Qifen received a great deal of care and support from both the doctors and her family. As a result, her mental state improved significantly as she began to think about a brighter future with her husband and child. However, her second surgery was postponed due to her weakened health. To aid her recovery, her family prepared a carefully planned diet for her. In February 2008, Luo Qifen returned to the hospital for a follow-up examination, and the results showed that her physical condition remained stable. However, the second surgery was more dangerous, so the hospital transferred her to the General Hospital of the Chengdu Military Region. There, the doctors decided to adopt a staged treatment approach. In the first stage, all the needles in the head and neck needed to be removed, while the second stage focused on removing the remaining needles. The head and neck are the most vulnerable areas, so the surgeons were extremely cautious with every movement. After 4 hours, the doctors successfully removed 3 needles from Luo Qifen's head and neck, each approximately 4 centimeters long. In the final stage, the remaining needles located in the lungs and liver required even greater care during surgery. Once removed, the needles were found to be heavily rusted, with the rust even adhering to the organs and tissues. If the needles were not removed, there was a potential risk of cancer developing in the future. The surgery went very smoothly, and Luo Qifen gradually regained consciousness, bursting into tears when she saw the steel needles that had been taken out of her body. From the moment she discovered the numerous needles in her body to the point when they were all removed, she felt as though years of her life had passed. After recovering, Luo Qifen decided not to continue investigating the origin of the needles. She believed that the suffering was behind her and that it was more important to look forward to a brighter future. Over the years, her body fully recovered, and she became no different from a healthy person. At the age of 44, she and her husband worked odd jobs for the owner of a nearby greenhouse, earning a stable income. The couple's son also graduated from university and secured a decent job. Reflecting on what had happened to her, Luo Qifen felt incredibly fortunate to have received help from so many people. Thanks to the kind doctors and medical staff, she was able to survive, and as a result, she deeply cherished her current happiness. Luo Qifen's story is not an isolated case in China. In poor regions with outdated thinking, the preference for sons over daughters has not yet been eradicated. Some young girls are still treated unfairly, denied access to education, abandoned, or suffer fates similar to that of Luo Qifen. Luck continued to smile on Luo Qifen as she lived like a normal person for 30 years, despite having 26 needles in her body. With the love of her stepfather, her husband, and the dedicated care of the doctors, she escaped the grip of death. The story of the woman with 26 needles in her body ends here. Please share your thoughts, feelings, and opinions about this story in the comments section below the video. This video ends here. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, as this will help us continue bringing you more meaningful content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos. The atmosphere in Nammon Village, Fonin District, Yunnan Province, China, was heavy with unease over the once peaceful countryside. In a short period, dozens of young people mysteriously went missing while passing by a road near a livestock farm. During this time, villagers often saw the farm owner pushing heavy carts late at night, with dangling plastic bags containing suspicious white bones. People also noticed an increasing number of rows of meat hung in front of the man's house, which he always introduced as ostrich meat. Locals from all around flocked to buy it, and the fame of the farm grew, yet no one knew whether the rows of meat hanging there were truly ostrich meat or not. Before diving into today's story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any new videos. On that fateful day, with the drizzle falling over the firing range, the notorious criminal Jiang Yongming was tied to a post by the police, awaiting execution. It was hard to imagine that an old man with such an ordinary appearance had been sentenced to death not once but twice. The number of victims at Jiang Yongming's hands was provisionally confirmed by the police to be 11, though the killer himself claimed he couldn't recall exactly how many he had murdered. Jiang Yongming calmly told the police, "However many sets of clothes are found, that's how many people I've killed." His indifference to the killings sent chills down everyone's spine. Han Yao, a 21-year-old young man, was a final-year university student in the mountains of Yunnan. With thick black hair, a slim build, and bright eyes, Han Yao was always the pride of his family. In early April, Han Yao received an assignment to intern at a construction site. His family disapproved of him going because it was in a remote mountainous area, but Han Yao's determination eventually persuaded his parents. On April 25, a seemingly normal day like any other, Han Yao packed his belongings and left with workers for the construction site. However, halfway there, he suddenly realized he'd left an important document on his desk. To avoid delaying everyone's work, Han Yao decided to return alone to the dormitory. He said goodbye to the group and quickly turned onto a shortcut through Nammon village, a narrow, secluded dirt path, a decision that would forever change his fate. As the workers were nearing the completion of their tasks, they noticed that Han Yao had still not returned, and concern began creeping in. A group of workers immediately went back to the dormitory to look for him, but oddly enough, the document Han Yao said he needed was still neatly placed on the desk. Clearly, he had never made it there. Alarmed, the workers began spreading out around the construction site to search. They called his name and combed through every corner, but after hours of searching, they found no trace of Han Yao. In the end, the workers had no choice but to inform Han Yao's family of the situation. Upon hearing the news, his family rushed to the construction site. Han Yao's parents repeatedly questioned the workers about what had happened. After listening to all the details, they quickly went to the local police station to report the case. When Han Yao's parents reported his disappearance to the police, a team of investigators promptly arrived at the scene to investigate. In stark contrast to Han Yao's parents' extreme worry, the local police appeared rather indifferent. A young officer reassured them, saying, "Han Yao is 21 years old, a healthy young man. It's not easy for someone like that to be kidnapped." The police believed that he might have just gone somewhere for fun and didn't want anyone to know. They advised Han Yao's parents to wait 2 more days. If he still hadn't returned, they would officially launch an investigation. The police didn't take the matter seriously, but Han Yao's parents were convinced that something was wrong and that their son was in danger. Taking matters into their own hands, his parents immediately called more than a dozen relatives from their hometown to Yunnan to help search for clues about Han Yao. During this process, they uncovered a horrifying secret. As Han Yao's parents went door to door questioning people in Nammon village, they were met with reluctant headshakes and helpless gazes from the villagers. Another disappearance? So many people have already gone missing on that road. These words struck Han Yao's parents like a bolt of lightning. They were horrified to realize their son wasn't the first victim. It turned out that many young people in the village had gone missing over the past few months. Families of the missing had reported the cases to the police, but in the end, nothing was done, and the cases faded into silence. Realizing the apathy of the local police, Han Yao's family decided to turn to the media for help. They contacted journalists, persuading them to report on the mysterious disappearances in the area. After much effort, some newspapers and television stations finally agreed to get involved. The first articles and reports were quickly released, causing a stir among the local public. The growing pressure forced the Yunnan Provincial Police to officially open an investigation. A special task force was formed with the mission to locate Han Yao and uncover the truth behind the series of disappearances in Nam Mon village. During the investigation, the task force discovered that the distance from Han Yao's office to the construction site was only about a 10-minute walk. Most of this route was along Provincial Road 214, a wide asphalt road, bustling with vehicles and pedestrians, making the possibility of an accident very low. However, the dirt road where Han Yao was last seen was far from the main road. It was a narrow path alongside a ditch, once the pride of Nam Mon village. A few years ago, when a new highway was built, people gradually stopped using the old path, leaving it desolate and neglected. Nam Mon village was remote and had yet to adopt modern technology. The lack of surveillance tools, such as security cameras or recording devices, caused the investigation to stall. Since May, there had been numerous mysterious disappearances in the area. When police reviewed the information they had gathered, they found that 17 people had vanished in just 1 year. Aside from an 80-year-old man and a 37-year-old man, the remaining missing individuals were all young people between the ages of 12 and 22. The sheer number of disappearances along the same road was highly suspicious. Public pressure continued to mount. The victims' families, including Han Yao's parents, repeatedly demanded justice, and the media tirelessly reported on the disappearances, making the case the focus of local attention. After many days of tireless investigation, the police finally discovered a critical clue. There was a farm adjacent to the dirt road where Han Yao and the other victims were last seen. A team of investigators was assigned to visit the site to determine whether it held the key to solving these strange disappearances. The livestock farm, located deep within Nam Mon village, belonged to a man named Zhang Yongming, who led a secluded life, rarely interacting with his neighbors. The police discovered that Zhang Yongming had previously been sentenced to death for murder. However, due to good behavior in prison, his sentence was commuted, and he was released after 20 years. Initially, no one thought the series of disappearances was connected to Zhang Yongming. Could a man who had spent 20 years in prison think of killing again? As police carefully analyzed the data they had collected, they realized that all the missing individuals were outsiders. None were from Nam Mon village. This led the police to suspect that the culprit had to be a local, as only someone familiar with the area could know the perfect times and places to strike without being detected. Moreover, the disappearances often occurred near Zhang Yongming's farm. The dirt road, where the young victims were last seen, was also not far from his home. The police realized that to advance the investigation, they needed to find a way to directly approach Zhang Yongming and search the enigmatic farm. Arriving at Zhang Yongming's house, they found the door tightly shut, as if the owner was absent. The officers scanned the area and noticed strips of dried meat dangling on a long clothesline outside. Initially, no one paid much attention. In Nam Mon, it wasn't unusual for residents to dry meat. However, when one officer stepped closer to inspect, his expression suddenly changed. The dried meat hanging on the line had a color and shape unlike any type of meat the officer had ever seen. A passerby stopped upon seeing police gathered around Zhang Yongming's house. When questioned, the person said that Yongming had claimed it was ostrich meat. In an instant, the officer's entire body began to tremble. He turned to his colleagues with a look of confusion, saying, "There aren't any ostriches around here. Where would a simple farmer like Zhang Yongming get ostrich meat?" The officer's words immediately sent chills down everyone's spine. They seemed to grasp the horrifying truth as they stared at the dangling strips of ostrich meat, stepping back in fear. The police decided to move deeper into Zhang Yongming's house to investigate further. The old wooden door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty interior. Suddenly, a strange, heavy stench filled the air, so overwhelming that everyone present couldn't help but grimace. Following the odor, the officers proceeded to the backyard, where they found several large plastic barrels stacked on top of one another. all sealed with thick duct tape. Yet the stench still leaked from the cracks, with maggots crawling all around. Donning gloves, the officers carefully peeled back the tape. As soon as the barrels were opened, the stench intensified, and even those who had braced themselves couldn't suppress their nausea. What they saw left everyone speechless. 5 barrels were filled to the brim with human body parts, submerged in a foul liquid. Beside the barrels, 6 sacks containing clothing, identification documents, and phones belonging to the victims were also found. The officers exchanged horrified glances. Continuing their search, they discovered a dry well less than 50 meters from the house, where more human bones and victim clothing were found. In Zhang Yongming's vegetable garden, investigators unearthed scattered human limbs and bones buried among the lush green rows, a scene far beyond anyone's worst nightmares. The police thoroughly examined the house, and in one corner, they found a large jar of white liquor, inside which floated dozens of human eyeballs preserved in alcohol. The strips of dried meat hanging from beams inside the house turned out not to be animal meat, but human flesh. Additionally, more than 50 pairs of shoes, belonging to victims of various ages, were discovered. Faced with irrefutable evidence, the police swiftly arrested Zhang Yongming. The murderer was taken directly to the investigation headquarters, while officers continued to exhume and document all the atrocities at his home. At the station, Zhang Yongming, without hesitation, confessed to all his crimes, detailing the murders, though he couldn't remember the exact number of victims. Delving into Zhang Yongming's past, investigators were shocked to learn that he hadn't suddenly turned into a monster. It was as if he was born with the instincts of a killer. Zhang Yongming was born in Nammon Village, Kunming City, China, the youngest of a family with 2 older brothers and 1 sister. From a young age, Zhang was withdrawn, taciturn, and solitary, forming almost no connections with anyone around him. His only friend throughout his childhood was a boy surnamed Lu, the only one who understood and tolerated him. On a fateful Christmas night, Zhang and Lu went out to play. When they returned home late, Lu was invited to stay over at Zhang's house. However, around 2 a.m., Lu awoke in excruciating pain. Struggling to open his eyes, he was horrified to find himself tied to a bed with Zhang Yongming, his best friend, stabbing him. Zhang's brutal actions not only left Lu in shock, but also terrified Zhang's parents, who immediately reported the incident to the police, unable to believe their son was capable of such violence. At the station, Zhang Yongming claimed he had been sleepwalking and didn't remember anything. Using this as his defense, Zhang was sentenced to only 6 months of re-education through labor. Years later, while selling rice, Zhang murdered a young man from a neighboring village named Yang. This time, the incident enraged the entire Nammon community. Villagers collectively signed a petition demanding Zhang Yongming receive the death penalty, branding him as an unforgivable, cold-blooded killer. However, the execution was delayed, and due to good behavior in prison, Zhang avoided the death penalty and was released after serving 18 years. Nearly 2 decades in prison left Zhang Yongming estranged from his family, who had scattered. Adding to his isolation, his older brother was also imprisoned after him. Zhang became even colder, living alone with 3 dogs as his only companions. In 2008, when the government reclaimed land in Nammon Village for a project, Zhang received a substantial compensation payment. With this money, he built a cold storage unit and started an ostrich farm, running a small business. No one suspected that Zhang Yongming's farm was merely a facade for his monstrous crimes. Outwardly, Zhang seemed ordinary, but to the people of Nammon Village, he was always strange, even frightening. His daily behavior unsettled the villagers. He kept several dogs that barked incessantly, especially at night. Even more bizarre, Zhang had a habit of blasting his TV at maximum volume late into the night, its piercing noise echoing across the village. What sent the deepest chills down people's spines, however, was Zhang wandering alone around the village gate at odd hours. No one knew his purpose, until the truth about the disappearances came to light. After careful investigation and forensic identification, the total number of victims murdered by Zhang Yongming was provisionally confirmed at 11, including Han Yao. All had fallen at the hands of this cold-blooded killer. With overwhelming evidence, Zhang Yongming was imprisoned and charged with intentional homicide under the law. Yet, a lingering question remained. What drove Zhang Yongming to commit such horrifying crimes? Why would someone who had once been sentenced to death, pardoned and released, return to such a dark and irreversible path? Rumors about Zhang Yongming began to spread. Many believed that his true motive was not just murder, but also the collection of remains from his victims. Though these rumors were not fully verified, they added to the terror surrounding Zhang Yongming's ruthless nature. After a thorough trial, the court delivered its final verdict for Zhang Yongming, the death penalty, an inevitable conclusion for his heinous acts. Before the execution, the police attempted to contact some of Zhang Yongming's distant relatives to arrange a final meeting. Surprisingly, Zhang resolutely refused to meet anyone, choosing to face his fate alone. A few days after the verdict, Zhang Yongming was escorted to the execution grounds. The gunshot rang out, his eyes wide with anger before his body collapsed to the ground. The gunshot ended Zhang Yongming's life, closing the chapter on his horrific series of crimes. Thank you for listening to today's crime story. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more captivating cases on our channel.